Yubel has received some new support for Phantom Nightmare. We're going to be reviewing what these cards are. Spirit of Yubel is a level 10 Dark Attribute Fiend type effect monster. It's got 0 attack and defense. Its effect is you can only use the first and second effect of this card's name each once per turn. 1. When an opponent's monster declares an attack, you can special summon this card from your hand. 2. If this card is special summoned, you can take one spell or trap card from your deck that mentions Yubel and either add it to your hand or set it. 3. It cannot be destroyed by battle. Also, you take no battle damage from battles involving this card. And 4. If this card is destroyed, you can special summon one of your Yubel that is banished or is in your hand, deck, or graveyard. Now, this is the evolution of the traditional Yubel. That card required 2 tributes as a level 10 monster to bring it out, and it had very similar styles of effects. This has the same attack and defense, and it being Dark Attribute Fiend type monster means it's pretty much the same. The first effect, simply when an opponent's monster declares an attack, just special summon this card, means you're getting rid of the 2 tributes needed for the original version. This is the upgrade. Second ability, when this card is special summoned, you're able to search for either a spell or trap card that mentions Yubel and either set it or add it to your hand. So depending on your situation, it might be better to set it if it's on your opponent's turn, as that means that you can activate it during yours, or potentially if you want to protect that card whilst it's in your hand and then activate it during your opponent's turn, you can also choose to go that way. Third ability, cannot be destroyed battle, and you take no battle damage from this card with any battles. That's actually the same effect as Yubel. It has that immunity from battle destruction, and by zeroing out damage, it means that you're in a better place. Downside of this is, of course, anything that has the ability to negate this effect, such as breakthrough skill, can also be quite devastating, as this loses the protection effect. Fourth ability, if this card happens to be destroyed, so you can either destroy it yourself or by your opponent's card effects, depending on what you choose to do and the situation. You're able to just take any Yubel that's banished or in the hand, deck, or graveyard and just replace it. So that's actually really useful, as those are all the sections that you can recover from. It means you've got lots of opportunity to use the card. Geist Grinder Golem is a level 8 Dark Attribute Fiend type effect monster with 3000 attack and 300 defense. You can only special summon Geist Grinder Golem once per turn. 1. You can reveal one Yubel monster in your hand, special summon this card from your hand to your opponent's field, and you can special summon the revealed monster to your field. 2. Once per turn during damage calculation, if this card battles a Yubel monster, your opponent gains 3000 life points. And 3. If you special summon Yubel while this card is in your graveyard, you can special summon this card to your opponent's field. Now, this is based on the original Grinder Golem. The reason that card was actually banned is because of the link spam issues, where you would be able to special summon the Grinder Golem to your opponent's field. It generates 2 tokens. You use those tokens to then go into link summons, and then it was used for Firewall Dragon. That was the traditional aspect that could then return the Grinder Golem to your hand, and you can continue to use those types of effects to generate more tokens and to go into further evolved link monsters. This is an upgrade and a downgrade at the same time. First ability, just by revealing the Yubel monster, just is able to special summon this to your opponent's field, so it's similar kind of style to the original Grinder Golem, but in exchange you're able to special summon the Yubel to your field, so it makes it much easier if you have the original Yubel. Second ability actually applies to if it attacks into Yubel, so remember, this is going to be special summoned to your opponent's field. When this attacks your Yubel, it's actually you who's going to be gaining the 3000 life points, not as such your opponent, so that's also a benefit. You're constantly being able to generate those life points, especially since the evolved versions of the Yubel, which are the level 12 and the level 11 versions, can force attacks on themselves if the monster happens to be in attack position, and there are other cards such as Staunch Defender and Battle Mania which can change your opponent's monsters to force into attacks. Third ability, if you happen to special summon a Yubel whilst this is in the graveyard, this can be revived to your opponent's field, so it does have that reoccurring effect, and it's not something that can only be used that once and then it's banished. It actually has that reoccurrence to it. Samsara Regenerating Lotus is a level 1 Dark Attribute Fiend type effect monster with 0 attack and defense. You can only use the first, second and third effects of this card's name once per turn each. 1. You contribute this card, special summon one Yubel monster from your deck. 2. During your opponent's turn, when a monster effect is activated or you control a Yubel monster, as a quick effect you contribute this card. That effect becomes destroy one Yubel monster on the field. And 3. During your end phase, if you control Yubel and this card is in your graveyard, you can take this card and either add it to your hand or special summon it. This card is very similar to another card they've got, which is a Samsara Lotus. This is just an advanced version. The first ability, just by tributing this card, you can just special summon any Yubel monsters you've got, so that's just instant easy access from the deck. Second ability, just when the opponent's monster activates their effect whilst you've got a Yubel, it forces causes it to become a destroy yubel effect. This is fantastic because anytime yubel is destroyed, it then upgrades into its newer form. So you'll either get, if you've got the level 10 form, it goes into the level 11. If you've got the level 11 form, it goes into the level 12. And because of that, it effectively negates the effect of that particular monster. And it's very similar to how a couple of the Dark World cards work, in that they force the effect to become a discard effect to then trigger off those Dark World effects. The third ability of this, if you just happen to have yubel and this card is in the graveyard, you're able to either bring it back to the hand or special summon it. So then it can either be used as part of a tribute for any other requirements, or it can then be used to then special summon into another version of yubel. This is Das Ewig Liebe Wachter, which is the evolved version of yubel. This is actually a fusion monster, so unlike the previous versions of yubel, those were all effect monsters. This is very much tied into Yugioh GX, which is considered the fusion version of all of the Yu-Gi-Oh series. It's a level 12 Dark Attribute Fiend type effect monster with 0 attack and defense. It requires as materials a yubel monster plus one or more effect monsters on the field. You can only use the first effect of this card's name once per turn. If this card is fusion summoned, you can inflict 500 damage to your opponent for each fusion material used for its summon. 2 cards, it cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects. Also, you take battle damage from battles involving this card. And 3, if this card battles an opponent's monster, at the end of the damage step, inflict damage to them equal to that monster's attack, and if you do, banish it. This card is the most evolved version of yubel as it is, and in terms of the summoning requirements, it's actually not too difficult. You'll have a yubel, and it just has to be a yubel monster. It doesn't have to be specifically yubel. So any of the evolution forms are perfectly suitable, plus one or more effect monsters. In terms of the first effect, this is actually a burn style of effect, and it's just 500 damage for each material used in its summon. At minimum, that's 1000. If you can max out, you could potentially OTK your opponent if you can manage to just use a load of materials. Second ability is very similar to how yubel works, in that it cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects. This is just an advancement because now it can no longer be susceptible to card effects as well as by battle, and you have your battle damage zeroed out. Third ability, if this card battles an opponent's monster, you're able to just inflict the amount of damage equal to that monster's attack. So think of it a little bit like an upgraded version of Elemental Hero Flame Wingman, but instead it also banishes it. This is more of an advantage than the previous level 12 version, as when that card destroyed by its effect, the monster was sent to the graveyard, and usually opponents can get some sort of benefits from the graveyard, whereas less so from the banish pile. The effect only works when this card battles an opponent's monster, so the third effect is reliant on your turn only. Nightmare Pain is a continuous spell card. You can only use the first effect of this card's name once per turn. During your main phase, you can destroy one dark monster in your hand or face up on the field, and if you do, add one yubel or one card that mentions it from your deck to your hand, except Nightmare Pain. 2, while you control any yubel monsters, all opponent's monsters must attack them if able. And 3, your opponent takes any battle damage you would have taken from battles involving your yubel monsters instead. The first ability of this card lets you destroy a dark monster, so if you happen to have yubel, that triggers off their effect to upgrade themselves, as well as conducting your search for either a yubel monster or one that has a spell or trap, for example, that has yubel listed within its card text. Second ability just forces all of your opponent's monsters to attack into your yubel monsters, so there's no longer a reason to run things such as Battle Mania or Staunch Defender. You've actually got something very specific, and this being a continuous spell card means it can be activated straight away. Third ability, all battle damage that would be threatened to your yubel monster is instead redirected to your opponent, meaning it's lethal for your opponent to actually attack into this without having any sort of game plan to remove this card. Mature Chronicle is a continuous spell card. Its effect is you can only use the second effect of this card's name once per turn. 1, each time a yubel monster and or a monster that mentions yubel is special summoned, place 1 Chronicle counter on this card. 2, you can remove up to 5 Chronicle counters from cards you control to activate one of these effects. 1, special summon 1 yubel from your graveyard. 2, add one of your banished cards to your hand. 3, banish 1 card from your deck. 4, destroy 1 card on the field. And 5, add 1 superpolymerization from your deck to your hand. In terms of the first effect, it's just to generate your Chronicle counters, and this just happens to be whenever a yubel is special summoned, so that can be repeated constantly. The second abilities, depending on how many Chronicle counters you remove, will depend on the effect. So you can either special summon a yubel from the graveyard, very easy access. Second is to recover one of your banished cards, which can also be quite useful. Third ability is to banish a card on your deck, so actually if you happen to use the third effect and then the second effect, they can actually work to recover a particular card instantly without having to search within your your deck. Fourth ability, just destroy a card on the field. It can be yours or your opponent's, so you can actually either trigger your yubel effects, or you can just choose to get rid of your opponent's spell, trap, or monsters. And 5 is to add super polymerization from your deck to your hand. That was the ultimate strategy of yubel, and that's the reason why it was kind of the final effect. This is an evolved version of Spell Chronicle, but in that case it happened to be that you can generate counters for every time your opponent activates a spell card. If you remove 2 counters, you basically get to recover one of the cards that you've banished in terms of a group of 5 every time you do that. So essentially you are waiting on these counters to be generated, which is never a good idea. And Eternal Favourite is a continuous trap card. Once per turn you can activate one of these effects, but you can only use each of the following effects of this card's name once per turn. Special summon one of your yubel monsters that is banished or is in your graveyard. Neither player can activate cards or effects when it is special summoned. Or if you control yubel, discard 1 card and send this face-up card from your spell and trap zone to the graveyard. Fusion summon 1 fusion monster from your extra deck, using monsters from either field as material, including a yubel monster. The benefit of the first part of the effect is you're just able to special summon a yubel monster that's in the banish or graveyard pile, and when you are summoning, it cannot be reacted to, so you can't have torrential tribute used against you or bottomless trap hole. None of those types of effects will work on that summoned card. Second ability means you don't actually have to run polymerization, as you're able to use by getting rid of this card and discarding a card. It also means that you can use monsters from either field, so it can be yours and your opponent's, and that means you'll be able to do far more burn damage. Overall, I'm quite excited about the new playstyle of yubel. It's actually keeping into the whole effects of how that card likes to work, and the archetype is very much supporting it. It does keep to searching for super polymerization, and it uses some old techniques of the deck but upgrades them for the modern era. Overall, I would say that my favourite card is definitely the fusion monster. It does upgrade itself from the level 12 effect monster equivalent to a fusion monster, and I would say the least useful might be the Samsara Lotus, as it's once you've gotten into a certain game state you no longer really need to rely on it for use.